All right. Well, here we are, session 3. So we're going to look at chapter 2, verse 5 through 11. So you can open up the word to there if you haven't already. And I've got a couple pictures to start out with here. So does anybody know who these people are? Anybody? Cambridge 7? Yep. What about the guy over here? Do you know this guy? Tiger Woods. You're correct. No. He's got one of the best names ever. His name is C.T. Stud. C.T. Stud. It's a great name. And so C.T. Stud was, he was part of a wealthy and influential family in England. And as he grew older, he went to Cambridge University and he became a famous cricket player. And he was very well known, very popular, very famous. And he came to Christ somewhere along the line in that journey. I can't remember the timeline of that. But he kind of was a little bit on fire for Christ and then kind of fell back a little bit into some casual faith. But then his brother started dying in 1884. And as his brother was grappling with his health, he wrote this in I think it was in his journal, or maybe he's just writing his reflections. But as he's considering the brevity of life and then eternity, he's reflecting on his own life. He says, I knew cricket would not last, and honor would not last, and nothing in this world would last. But it is worthwhile living for the world to come. He was watching his brother die, and that's what he thought about. It is worth living for the things that last for eternity, not the things that expire, not the things that wither away. And so he began to get that one mindset we've been talking about, that loving God first, loving others second for the sake of the gospel. And he began to reignite that fire in his life. And then around that same time, Hudson Taylor, one of the first missionaries to mainland China, came through, and he was speaking on China's need and talking about how these millions of people were passing to eternity without Christ, and the call to give your life to something worthwhile. And so C.T. Stud and these 6 other guys, known as the Cambridge 7, even though one of them didn't go to Cambridge, he responded to that call, and they went to China. You can tell they lived in what was then the traditional Chinese dress. They raised support. They lived a hard life to get the gospel into China. And even while C.T. was there in China, his father died, and he got an inheritance, which if you translate it to money or to dollars in today's economy, it would have been over $6 million. So here he is, raising support, living a hard life, and here's this inheritance that he has, this power, this fame, this influence, this money that he could use for himself, and he gives it all away. He gives it all away to George Mueller's orphan ministry. He gives it away to people reaching out in other areas of the world for the gospel. So he was getting this mindset. Instead of using fame and wealth and personal gain, he gave it all. He set it aside for the Chinese and for those who hadn't heard the gospel to love God with everything because of what God has done for him, and to love others for the sake of the gospel. And so if you remember this morning, we talked about turning away from selfish ambition and personal glory to fight for this unified mindset, to love God with everything, love others for the sake of the gospel. And now Paul, he kind of turns it up another notch, right? It's like he keeps cranking it up one more notch in this section about living a life worthy of the gospel. And now he says, okay, that's good, but now let's look to the ultimate example. We are called to take the mindset of Jesus Christ, to gaze on him, to meditate on him, and to adore his life in such a way that we become imitators of his life, how he lived out that mindset. It's not a different one, it's just the supreme example to follow. And so that's where we're going. This is Paul's famous, you could call it a poem. Some people think it might have been a hymn at the time. But we're going to talk about the mindset of Christ and how we are commanded to take on that mindset. So in verse 5, remember they're dealing with tension. These believers are struggling, they're suffering, there's tension from the outside, there's tension on the inside affecting their unity. And so Paul's saying, in your relationships, as you're struggling, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Or the ESV, have this mind among yourselves. And really, those two translations are just emphasizing two different aspects of the verse. They're really not contradicting each other. One is more emphasizing the theology of it. You have this mindset. You're united with Christ. You have it already because you are united with Christ. That's the ESV. The NIV is more the ethical emphasis. Model your life. Take on the mindset of Christ. And it's probably more the emphasis of the passage. So we're going to go with that one. That it's this ethical push that Paul is getting on them. And so Paul holds up Christ as the example. And so we're going to fix our eyes on that and see what we can learn from Christ's humble mindset in this famous poem, this famous hymn. So first we're going to see Christ's mindset expressed in his letting go. His letting go. In verse 6 says we're supposed to take on the mindset of Christ, who was, being in his very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, or the ESV, something to be grasped, to be held onto. That phrase, being in very nature God, it's this idea that this is a continuous existence in his nature, or in the essence of God. It's pointing to his eternal existence. There was no beginning, and all the way back in eternity past, he has always been God in his very nature and essence, fully God. And he possessed all the glory, all the rights, all the privileges of God. But he says he didn't see his privileges and power and prestige as something to be leveraged and used for his own gain. He didn't grasp them for himself. Instead, he saw that as a unique opportunity. He was in a unique position with his power, his prestige, and his position to serve others in a way no one else could. He could live the perfect life and die as a sacrifice for us. And so instead of grasping it for himself, he leveraged his unique situation for the good of others. His mindset was set on valuing others above himself and to look on their interests rather than his own. And so he did that. And it's like a contrast. So my dad used to teach middle school science. So you think about kind of a crazy job, teaching middle schoolers for 32 years. I mean, that takes some patience, right? But I used to be in the grade school when he would teach, and sometimes we would have school, or we wouldn't have school and they would. So I'd go to work with my dad, and he would show these, sometimes show these videos, National Geographic or whatever. And I remember one in particular, it was just captivating to me. It was this video about monkey hunting in Africa. Have you guys ever seen this? Do you know how they hunt monkeys in Africa? It's really intriguing. So they have these termite mounds, and they will dig a hole into a termite mound, kind of a narrow hole, and then they open a bigger hole in the back of the hole. And then they put something shiny in there, or they put some food in this hole. And the baboon or the monkey, whatever, will be watching this hunter do this, and he's just intrigued. He's really curious. And so the picture here is of a gourd, so it's the same idea. But so what happens is this baboon gets fixated on this thing that he thinks, I really want this. I think this will be good. And he slides his hand in through the narrow channel, and then he grabs the food, but his fist is too big to get out of the hole. And so he starts, you can see these videos. They are screaming, scrambling, going all around like crazy. All he has to do is let go, and he'd be free. But he is so captivated, this thing will be for my benefit. And so I'm grasping it for my own good. But he doesn't realize he's trapping himself by grasping on what he thinks is going to be for his good. And so it ends up to his detriment. He's trapped by his own desires. And in our sinfulness, we are the same as a baboon. We have these things that we see. We think we can use them, this power, privilege,